Hey guys, this is Jay Calder with Jay Unboxing here with a fight preview for Gilberto Ramirez versus Gabe Rosado. And before we get into my initial thoughts here, a couple of things. First, want to hear what you guys think about this one down in the comments section below, of course. All your picks, your bets, just your kind of beliefs, thoughts, views on this fight, of course. Love to hear all that. And of course, would love to apologize for my absence for the last week or so. I've been really knocked out, was really sick, but should be bouncing back now. Hopefully you can't hear too much in my voice here, but in any event, we'll be getting into this now. So, of course, like I said, drop all that stuff down in the comments section below. And of course, subscribe greatly helps out as well. A little bit of fight info here. We have Gilberto Ramirez taking on Gabe Rosado. This will be taking place at the Walter Pyramid in Long Beach, California, airing live on DAZN in the light heavyweight division with, of course, no title on the line. Now, in terms of my initial thoughts, my first one, to be honest, when I heard this fight being announced, was just how silly this fight could end up being. And that could happen in a number of ways. The first way I think is the most obvious one, the one that I think most people expect, which is that Ramirez completely blows out Rosado, which he probably should be doing if he has much to offer the sport at light heavyweight. It will look really bad, in my opinion, for kind of both parties involved to some degree if Ramirez is able to go in there and just completely blow him out, kind of waste his time in that sense, because he will gain nothing but just another win at that point for his career. And for Rosado, a guy who's a very proud, brave fighter with a lot of heart, to just go in there and get bulldozed would obviously not look good for him. But then there's the flip side of that, where if Rosado does actually make it a bit more of a fight than you might expect him to do potentially, or that I might expect him to do, it's not going to look good for Ramirez at all. This is one of those things where it's just damned if you do, damned if you don't if you're Ramirez, because you really don't want to make this a dog fight and have it actually be entertaining, because that says maybe some things about you that you don't want it to say. But at the same time, even if you blow him out, so what? Of course, the next thought that kind of entered my mind is just what exactly does Gabe Rosado have left? You know, he's been around the block a few times. He has double-digit losses. For a fighter that's kind of been in some marquee matchups, has actually had his name there headlining a couple of big shows, that's a lot of losses in boxing. We're not, this is not MMA where you have that kind of thing happening consistently anyway. Now, do I think that losses should make up every single part of your career and be the only thing that matter? Of course not. I'm actually very against that, to be honest. But in the case of Rosado, this is a guy who more or less has come up short against every big-named fighter that he's been put in against for the most part. And now he's an older fighter fighting a much bigger, naturally fighter. I think it's going to be a tough road for him. And it's just kind of, again, in terms of my initial thoughts, was the first thing that kind of came to mind when thinking of this contest. And again, I sort of alluded to this too. I think one of the biggest things that was in my mind was, can Ramirez even use this fight to make any kind of real statement? Does beating Rosado do anything for anyone in terms of convincing you that now he's going to make some noise at 175 pounds? I think the answer to that for most people is no. But it could definitely put a damper on his career if he is not able to blow out a guy that in most people's estimations he should be blowing out at this point. Now, for the winner, if it's Ramirez, it's a stay busy, warm up fight. It really isn't going to be much more than that. That's what this fight has to be. It's what has to be kind of viewed as in this fight when you're going into it if you're Ramirez. Again, maybe you want to get some rounds in where you're kind of dictating terms a little bit. That's great, but it can't be too many rounds or it does look a little bit bad. For Ramirez, this fight is as basic as it can be in that you need to make sure you get those rounds in, feel more confident, look good, but then get it over with. This doesn't really show you that he can do much at 175 pounds at all, beating a faded 154 to 160 pounder. So you want to make sure that you're, again, getting what you need out of the fight. Get busy, get a payday, whatever it might be, but make sure that you're kind of wrapping it up as well and succinctly as you can. For Rosado, it could represent a giant turnaround. Again, does it mean that he's necessarily going to make the biggest waves in the sport? Probably not. Again, in against the best fighters in the sport, he has come up short. However, it could represent that ability to kind of restore some faith in his career for some people, give him a couple of other shots, even a rematch here where he's getting a little more rewarded for his efforts. So it's certainly something that means quite a bit to him in his career in this particular case. And it also gives him a few options in a few different weight classes. He's, again, not a light heavyweight, but could this give him some opportunities at middleweight or even super middleweight? Of course it could. And I think that's certainly, going to give him at least enough reason to want to win this fight. And for the loser, if it's Ramirez, it would be real trouble. I mean, he would have a massive rebuild ahead of him. Now, again, What are the odds that he's going to lose this fight? Not very high in my opinion. But that being said, losing to a faded 154-pounder just doesn't bode well for your career against the monsters that are at 175 pounds, especially after you've suffered your first loss coming into this fight against Dmitry Bivol, at titleist at 175 pounds. So you really can't afford to have your sort of second loss on the bounce, especially against a guy that, again, with all due respect to Rosado, I don't want this to come across rather disrespectfully, you need to be beating. You really need to make sure that you're not on the losing end of this fight if you're either guy, but especially in Ramirez's case, you're not going to be given much sympathy for it. For Rosado, if you're to lose, it's hard to say really on some level because you've had losses and it just don't really seem to count for you. You've had a bunch. You've had, I think, a dozen or so at the very least. Still seems to keep getting shots because he's entertaining, he's exciting, he's a crowd favorite, he's got a name. So I don't know if it necessarily totally ends his career in that respect, or ends his career at the top anyway. I think ultimately it will depend on how he loses. It's really only bad if he loses bad or ugly, in other words. If he's able to, again, kind of maintain the Rosado brand of being a tough guy that will come to fight, will show up, and will put on a show, put in some effort, I think he's going to be okay. On the other hand, if he's unable to do that and is blown out for the first time or stopped or just really badly beaten, it could be trouble for him himself. So it's certainly something he wants to kind of be on the lookout for too, but I don't think it's going to mean that he's going to step back and try and be more tactical in his approach. He's still going to come to fight. And again, he'll probably have to because this is a tough order for him. But in any event, that's what I'd say for the loser of this fight. And in terms of what to expect, I think in some ways it's obvious. It should be a demolition job for Ramirez if he has anything left to offer at light heavyweight. That's, again, I need to stress this, not to be disrespectful to Rosado, but this is what it should be in terms of my expectations. If it's not, I'm going to be surprised. Pleasantly for Rosado in many respects, because I do think it's always nice when an underdog can win a fight, but that's what I would expect this fight to be. I expect to see some effort from Rosado. I expect to see him try and bite down on that gum shield and try to come forward and win this fight, of course. Again, I don't think he's going to lay down for anyone. I certainly think that it's going to be a tough task for him as well because, again, they're stacking the deck as much as they can. Bigger guy, naturally longer guy, a heavier guy, a guy who's taken bigger shots from bigger fighters, who has some decent pop himself. He's a fresher fighter. However you look at it, he's measuring up well against Rosado, so he certainly doesn't have the deck stacked against him, does Gabriel. While it lasts, I do expect something of a good fight. Again, I do think Ramirez probably stops him. For the record, you won't see a prediction for this fight. I'm trying to weed out some of the easier picks for myself this year, and it'll reflect itself in my record for picks this year, but I don't really give a damn. I'm just not trying to pick easy, step over fights in my opinion. Sometimes do happen to get some fights where, the upset will occur, but that's just a risk I'm willing to take in terms of not picking that because, quite frankly, it's just not fun, and I don't think it's a particularly interesting video to begin with. But in any event, while the fight lasts, I think it'll be good for however long it lasts. But ultimately, what I expect is Ramirez to get the job done here. But in any event, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. What are your views on this one? Let me know. I'd love to hear all that. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter, jcalderon_JOB. You can email me at junboxing@gmail.com. Love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out my upcoming predictions and previews, which I'll, of course, have on the channel. So go ahead and hit the subscription button as well as the bell notifications. You get alerted for all of that as well. And you can check out junboxing.com for news, rankings, schedule, results, betting odds, all that good stuff. And as always, until next time.